The theory behind a goals-based advice business is one thing, but where can we see it in action or hear about it from someone who is currently providing advice in a solid goals-based advice business? Well, I guess the answer is right here in this episode number 138 of the Goals-Based Advice podcast, where I chat with Finn Dorney from Shadforth Financial Group. Finn steps us through his client journey from the initial conversations through to the ongoing and review and progress meetings, and how he helps his clients celebrate the achievements of their goals. Now, the process can be extensive and can be 5 to 7 client meetings and is extremely focused on the client's goals. And Finn has been fortunate enough to receive some great mentoring over the years and shares a lot of these tips and ideas and philosophies with us. So if you're interested in hearing about the practical meeting structure of a fantastic goals-based advice experience, then this episode number 138 of the Goals-Based Advice podcast is exactly what you're looking for. Welcome to the show, Finn.
Thanks, Fraser. Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic to chat to you, coming all the way from, I think we're at the other ends of the country at the moment.
We are. I'm down in very cold Tassie at the moment, a lot of rain, but it is beautiful.
Yep, fantastic. And I'm coming to you from Queensland. So it's one of these things, a great technology. We can just jump on the Zoom and record. Fantastic. Do you want to give us, the listeners, a very quick overview of you and your situation at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a financial advisor working for Shadforth Financial Group. Have been working with the business now for about 15 years. I started straight out of university and had a job as what was called a paraplanner back then. Now more so an associate advisor. So we used to do a lot of assistance with the advisors and learnt the process with forms and paperwork and the whole process through. And then when started meeting clients with the advisors or the mentors that I worked with back then. And then worked my way up to becoming my own advisor, which has been an interesting and fun journey.
Yeah, and the whole time you were with Shadforth?
Yep.
And how does that business work? Are you a co-owner of the business? Or are you employee?
So we're salaried employees. Yep. And that was a little bit different when I started. So a little bit of the history of Shadforth is we were a number of firms, independent firms across the country, and sort of through the GFC, so not the greatest timing, or maybe it was the best timing, I don't know. We merged, I think it was 12 or 13 firms together to become the Shadforth Financial Group. So, the idea behind the merge was very much taking the best of all of the different groups and advisors to bring together for what we call best advice.
Yep. And when you entered into this process as a technical, let's say the paraplanning role, was this career path always open for you?
Look, yeah, very much so. I think it wasn't a direct graduate program back then, but I know the business was very favourable of that kind of process, because I think, they got us in early when we were green and able to, really teach us the foundations of advice. And, at that stage, I think we were, a fair way down the path of full holistic financial advice, or certainly on the start of that journey anyway.
Yeah, fantastic. And then you've gained experience over time and then got used to then becoming the front line, if you like, or having that direct contact with clients. Were you sitting in meetings as paraplanner?
Yeah, probably not straight away. I reckon maybe after about 3 to 6 months, we started sitting in on meetings. And that was where I learnt everything. So I was very lucky. I had a couple of very good mentors, and they really took the time to teach me the basic skills and then develop those skills as well.
Yeah, this is sort of the new the new way we've got now with the professional year and all these sorts of pathways into financial advice. Really is important, isn't it? Sitting in these meetings and just listening and understanding how different questions are asked and when they're asked and why they're asked.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I can see there's been probably a little bit of a push over the last couple of years to have outsourced paraplanning, and maybe that has a little bit of a place there. But if you want to grow your business and develop the younger advisors coming through, then absolutely you need to be able to take the time to mentor them.
Yeah, this is a really interesting thing because obviously there's advantages and disadvantages to insourcing or outsourcing paraplanning. Take us through the idea of the difference between a paraplanner as you were not sitting in meetings versus sitting in meetings from the paraplanner's perspective.
It's a really good question. I think we even battled with that a little bit as a business in how to get that right. But when I started, it was you'd get set, a series of notes and a fact find, or as we call a personal financial questionnaire, and then you're meant to develop a plan for that client. It's very difficult when you don't know the emotional side of the client. You're not there to actually see how they answer the question. So, as a business, we thought it was a really important concept to get the associate advisor or paraplanners into the meetings to actually see that the client answer those questions and really get an understanding of what they were trying to achieve. And I think that really assisted me, particularly back then, in how to write the plans, because it certainly wasn't just a compliance document back then. It was very much this is your plan. This is something that you can sit on the coffee table and refer back to.
Yeah, you're almost part of building that plan with them and understanding. The personalization of the plan really comes from that sitting in the meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Fantastic. So then your career path, you had an opportunity to become an associate. How did that work for you?
I think just through doing the study at the time, the graduate program, and then continuing on to doing the CFP, Certified Financial Planner. I think just with the opportunities of sitting with the mentors, they were at that stage really starting to design their lifestyle and their client base to be very, very specialised in certain areas. So that allowed me the opportunity to come in sort of under them and start assisting clients directly myself, and certainly ones where I had probably more expertise. And that really was probably in the technology side and the cash flow modelling side, which the advisors I worked under, that was quite new to them.
Yeah. Okay. So you were able to bring something in additional to the conversation. And how long did that take you from sort of when you started there to when you became an advisor?
Look, I think I started would have been 2004, and I think I started advising mid 2008. So right in kind of in the middle of the GFC, which was challenging in itself, but certainly allowed me the relationships I built then I think are ones for life, because we all went through a challenge together. So I think 4 to 5 years, I guess, is the rough time frame. Yeah.
Yeah. I call it the apprenticeship. It's kind of like, it seems to be that time when you've gathered not just the knowledge, but the confidence and the understanding of how something happens in that time where you really start to kick on as a with the level of experience that you have really just starts to shine through.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point, because I know a lot of individuals and younger individuals that come into the industry now are pretty keen to start advising early, but it just takes that time, I think, to develop those personal skills. The technical skills obviously are at the utmost importance as well. But for me, I think sitting in on those meetings for a couple of years, or 3 years almost, it was exactly what I needed to get to that stage that I was off and running. Didn't take me long to then develop my own I suppose my own strategy with clients as well.
Yeah, and then there came the moment when you were then the advisor in the room. Tell us about that. How did that go for you?
Look, it was I think a pretty important moment in my career, because you're actually taking over that client's financial future, and I always took it really seriously and absolutely still do. But those first few where they were, I guess, directly my clients, you're pretty nervous, but at the same time, I had all the tools, and it's like a footy player running out for their first game. If they've been mentored properly, I think they just fall into place pretty easily.
Yeah. And how much of what you do now is what was taught to you by your mentors, and how much is it of you? Like how much have you brought into this?
Oh, look, I'd say the foundation was absolutely taught to me by my mentor. I'd say at least 50 to 60% of how I structure, the client engagement definitely came from that learning. But obviously, you're always going to have your own personality. And, one thing I've learned is that not every client that you see as a new client is going to fit the mold. And you generally pick up on that pretty quickly. And I think as long as you pick up on that, it's a good opportunity to maybe send that client to another advisor in your group if you've got one, because it's going to work better for both of them, into the future. So not try and hold on to everything and try and be all things to all people. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, because this is a really good point, because every single, when you've got a larger business like Shadforth, and the advisors are salaried and everyone has their own personality, their own flair, their own confidence, their own way that they, present themselves, yet as a business, you sort of need to have everybody reasonably consistent. So there's this constant juggle, isn't there, between, trying to get everything, like, I don't know, use the word franchise or McDonaldized type thing, but, consistent. Yep. Versus then have that individual flair, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we sort of took that process and said, look, we want to systemize the process. So the process is the same, but, customize the advice or customize the experience based on the client and your own flair, as you've said. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And you do have that ability to say to somebody, well, if you're not a great personality fit with me, we have somebody over here that you'd actually really get along with.
Yeah, and often, if you feel it, most times they're feeling it as well. So, and look, I've had a couple of clients that absolutely appreciated that. So, I also think that's the importance of gender diversity in your business if you can have that, because there's definitely a few clients that I felt were much more comfortable with a female advisor, and that relationship with that advisor now is really, really strong and thriving. So yeah, it's an important factor.
Yeah, fantastic. And probably also age diversity comes into that too, if you get some.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, fantastic. So tell us about your practice now. And how you work and how you set up your meeting structure and how you sort of, let's say I'm a new client coming in, what experience would I go through?
So again, this is something we've developed over, many years in trying to get this right, not only for us as a business, but for the client in their experience, because that's obviously the number one thing. So the utmost first thing I'd do is give you a call as a client and have a chat and make sure that you're the right fit for us and we're obviously the right fit for you, because there's no point going any further or wasting your time as a client in trying to develop a relationship that isn't going to succeed. So we'd have a chat, we'd gather down some initial information, and then we'd make a time, usually a week later, for what we would call the discovery meeting. So in that process, what we'd actually do is send out some, used to be paper forms, but now we've moved to technology along quite quickly. So we send out a digital form for the client to fill in as much information as they can about themselves, and to give them some information of things to bring along to that discovery meeting. What that allows us to do is spend most of the time in the discovery meeting in doing exactly that. So the client gets to discover what we do, but of course that's the great opportunity for me as an advisor to ask the client great questions. I was obviously once told we're judged on the questions we ask, not what we say. So it's a really important factor in that meeting.
That's a fantastic way of phrasing it. I think, absolutely judged on the questions we're asked, not the answers we're given. And I think it's really, I'm glad you shared that. Thank you, because that's a really important thing for advisors to get their heads around. You were given that information by a mentor, and I think other people will be able to take that information away. I just want to go back to the call. It's a phone call or a Zoom meeting or an online meeting?
Well, actually, it used to be mainly just a phone call, but probably over the last 6 months, we've started using Zoom quite a bit, and obviously that's accelerated through the recent COVID issues that we've got. So I think a lot of people are actually really comfortable with Zoom, a lot more than I thought would be the case. So yeah, phone call or Zoom meeting.
And when you're on that call, you're obviously asking them a little bit about why they're wanting to inquire, or what are their What are they thinking? What are their pain points? I'm not going to say pain points, obviously. But then do you also explain how you work and what you do and all those sorts of things during that meeting?
Yeah. Look, I try not to go into too much detail because, we are in most cases going to have that discovery meeting, but I definitely talk about the process. So the fact that the phone call really is just, for us to make sure we can work together. The discovery meeting is really to delve into exactly what makes them tick and the philosophical side of everything, and then talk about the process moving forward.
Yep.
In most cases, we can always, we can discuss even how the costs work in that first meeting. I certainly don't ever want to shy away from that. I think fees should be transparent. Clients in most cases understand that we're a business as well, so there is going to be a cost, and if they don't value that, then of course fees are going to be an issue. But fees are only an issue in the absence of value.
Yeah, absolutely. So fantastic. You might go through some of the fee structure and you set the scene for the discovery meeting. How do you do that with your client? Because I know sometimes clients walk into a discovery meeting, and if they're expecting a financial advice meeting, that can be very different. So How do you set that scene? What do you say to the client? So
I say to the client in that first meeting that the discovery meeting is not going to be me giving advice. It really is going to be me asking a lot of questions and trying not to talk. I think early on I found that pretty difficult. We think we have to blurb out all this information to show how much we know, but in reality, that's just going to bamboozle most people, and they're going to walk away going, what was that? So really, I explained that the discovery meeting.
Can I jump in there? I absolutely agree. And I think it comes from a place of we all want to help clients, right? And we all want to help them so badly that we tend to get excited and jump in with it. I can help you with that, boom, 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 and we can solve this problem really quickly. And you're right, it's that stepping back and just asking deeper questions that really cements the relationship part. And I know you are going to help them eventually, I think is the key.
Yeah, and the way I actually got over that was my mentor at the time, he had me run a few meetings before I started advising, and he basically went to the point of saying, right, I'm going to write down or count the number of times that you've gone too far and you should have stopped. And, without going into too much detail, it was significant. So we really use that as an opportunity to train me to stop talking.
Yeah. And we hate the role play. We all hate the role play, but it actually, going back and reflecting on those moments is really, really important.
Yep, totally. Yep.
Sorry. So you set the client up for the discovery meeting. Talk us through how the discovery meeting works for you.
So the very first thing that we do when the client comes in is, obviously it's the first time we're meeting face to face. So you want to get an idea of how the client works and really, whether they want to talk a lot or if it's a couple who's doing the majority of the talking. So once we've got through that process, I think they've already come to that meeting really understanding what it's about. So I don't think it's a new thing. The very first question we'd ask the client after that is, what's important about money to you? And it's easy to have the dominant person speaking for both of them. So usually what we would do is, or in most cases, actually stop the dominant person speaking and get the non-dominant person to answer first. Because I think that gives us a really good understanding of what that person's views are, which you may not get for a number of years after that initial meeting if you don't.
Yeah, it's a really important part, isn't it? Just to not let one person hog the meeting in that dominant position, and to bring both voices out, both opinions out.
Yep. So I think
have you ever had any dramas with that? Or
I think in a few cases the dominant person still just talks over the top, and I think rather than trying to push it too much, you kind of let that happen. But over the next couple of meetings, you do really want to focus on the other person in that case. But I think they understand. I think most couples probably, see where they sit in that relationship, and it hasn't become an issue for me to date.
Yeah, fantastic. So you're starting asking about the importance of money to people. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and then I just delve really into what their goals and objectives are, and I think once you understand the philosophical side, it's easier to pad out what those goals actually look like, and rather than just saying they want to grow their super, you need to keep asking the why. And I think I often use the analogy, and I explain to clients that they're not coming to me as an example for guitar lessons. They're coming to learn to play the guitar. So we need to find out that final, where do you want to be? And so I think the development of the questions and the why, and the continuing to really push them, which can make it a little bit uncomfortable. But I do explain that up front, that it could be a little bit, or could feel a bit uncomfortable. That really we're getting some really strong goals and objectives that I explain. Everything then comes back to that. The advice is going to be absolutely focused on you guys as clients hitting these targets.
Yeah, I like the analogy actually, because playing a musical instrument, you're right. The lessons and the things you put in place, or the strategies of how you're going to learn it, that are just on the way to the outcome. So yeah, I really like the idea of helping them visualize what the outcome looks like by the musical instrument analogy. When you're talking to them about goals, obviously it's very difficult sometimes to find that and to get to that, and sometimes people can be a little bit resistant of no, I just want this thing. I think I just want this thing. How do you go through that process with them?
Look, I think I explained to them that often people have very different reasons for coming to see us, and I think in most cases they really don't understand what we do. So, it might be that they've got superannuation, it might be that they've inherited money. They want us to help them invest the money. And, I think jumping back a little bit, when I first started in the industry, I think that's what unfortunately we did wrong, in that we did sell our value as, we're investment specialists. And at the end of the day, we do need to make sure the clients get the best result with their investments, but we're not here to forecast or pick, whether China's going to grow, or, pick that the COVID's going to happen, and understand, what the future holds with economics, because at the end of the day, we don't know. So, I explain clients right up front that my job is, I'm not going to be getting you in and out of different investments. I'm not going to be moving things around all the time, trying to get you a better return, because we all know that doesn't work. It costs money. And, if I have 70 to 80 clients to look after, I can't physically do that for every single one of them all through the day. So if that's what their value is, and that's all they think they're wanting to get from me, then, I'll end that relationship there, because no one's ever going to win. So I think once we've got through that particular challenge, if you like, I think it's to explain to clients that, look, we'll make sure they get a good investment result and have a good experience. Let's sit that to the side, because we'll come back to that at a later date. Our job is to make sure you can retire at 65, or you can send your kids to private school, or whatever that might be. And if you don't have those goals set down, or you aren't able to communicate them, then in reality, we're not going to be able to help you in the way that we really should be able to help you.
Yeah. Do you find that once they've been through the why process a few times, and they understand what the emotional aspect and that end point and the goal, what their goal actually is, not nothing to do with financial strategy, what the goal actually is, and once they've been through that with maybe one or two goals, the rest are just flow a lot more easily? Yeah,
Fraser, I reckon that's absolutely true. So I think that first discussion with the whys is definitely the most uncomfortable one, but then they do tend to understand how the process works. And look, you can't push someone to the nth degree if they're really not wanting to do it in that first meeting. Because of our process, and I'll talk about that in more detail in a minute, but because our next meeting is still, in most cases, not giving the advice, we're still talking more and discovering more about the client, their preferences and goals and tastes, that we've got an opportunity to, develop those goals further if we need to in that particular meeting.
Yep. So this discovery meeting, 90 minutes long, that's correct? Yep. So an hour and a half conversation. Do you find? I think a lot of people I speak to say this is a good length, because there's no way you can do it in an hour, and by the time you get over 90 minutes, it just becomes a bit too much.
Yep. I think that time frame. Look, it doesn't go the 90 minutes for every client, but as you said, if you try to push it into 60, you're going to be rushing. and that's the worst thing you could do in that first meeting. So I'd say, look, majority of them would be definitely somewhere between the 60 and 90 minutes.
Yep. And how many goals are you looking to bring out in that time?
It's a really good question. I think, again, when I started, it might have been one or two. Retire at 65 or, help the grandkids, whatever it might be. I say to the clients up front now that we're looking for a minimum of 5. If we can't communicate 5 goals, like 5 goals, that seems crazy. How are we going to find that? But the more you develop and you chat to clients, I actually find it's very easy. So, minimum of 5, somewhere between 5 and 10 is a really good result. And they can be things that they, initially didn't think was a goal. Doing a kitchen renovation in the next 12 months, they might think, well, we've already planned for that. We've already got the money sitting there. But of course, things change, and so it's very important to put those things down. Because life changes, like we're experiencing at the moment, and we need to be able to prioritise those things.
Yeah, exactly right. I do like that. 8 to around the 8 number of goals to have in place. Now, that doesn't mean clients can focus on all 8 at the one time, but certainly they're in the plan. And do you often have goals that might have come up and that they're like parked, they're sitting there as a nice to have one day, then not necessarily the most prioritized goal, but they'll come into the plan in the future?
Yeah, definitely. So I think every goal should be prioritized. We use a simple, high, medium, low process at the moment, and we have an ongoing or completed phase. So we spent a lot of time. I mentioned earlier that we've spent a lot of time developing our digital tools, and one of them allows us to constantly review those goals. They're all on one screen. We might change the priorities, and we might tick them off as being completed. So it's really important that when you do complete those goals, that they should be celebrated as well. So, it's an important factor that you don't put a goal down unless it's important to you. And so when we tick it off, we should be, high-fiving each other. And in most cases, for my clients, I'll look after them with a bottle of champagne for something big, or I'll take them out for a lunch if it's a major milestone for them.
Well, yeah, wonderful. A good excuse to have a client meeting, not because it's an annual review or because it's time, but because they actually did something and they hit a goal. Yep. Amazing. Now, with the technology, you mentioned sort of you guys have introduced a lot of technology over the time. How have clients adapted to that?
And again, I think a lot of the challenges was all in our head. I think we're often saying, our older retired clients, they're not going to be up for technology. And to some degree, if you've got an 80-year-old client, maybe they're not, and that's fine, because they'll probably be the minority that they don't want to learn a new thing, and that's absolutely fine. But I'd say honestly, 95 to 98% of our clients have fully got on board with the digital tools. Mostly because they don't like chopping down trees, sending them reams of paper, but it's actually easier for them. So I really believe that once they've got that information online, they can see that it's there. They can also see that we're able to update it far easier and tick off those goals as they come.
Yeah, exactly right. And you're absolutely right. Ticking them off, celebrating them. I also think it's easier for them to talk about you in their, the circle of the barbecue or whatever, in a scenario where they've just celebrated a goal and there might be some pictures of it on a social media platform, or that, there's them celebrating the goal and then you kind of get dragged into the conversation.
Yep.
Do you find that you pick up referrals from that, goal ticking celebration?
100%. Yeah. And I think, if you're not getting majority, and I'd say 80+% of your new clients from referrals, then you're probably doing something wrong. Referrals and getting referrals from your existing clients is a discussion in itself. But I think if you're there really celebrating with them and being on the journey, you're going to get those goals. You're going to get those referrals anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect time. You helping your clients celebrate their achievement definitely brings you into the conversation. So I think it's one of those areas that I really love about goals-based advice, is ticking those off and helping celebrate those wins. Fantastic. We're sort of that, so that's the discovery meeting. We sort of went through that. Tell us about the next step in your process.
So I think once we've got majority of the information we need from the client, we know how much money they've got in the bank. We know all those things. We now know all of their goals. Our job is to go and work as a team behind the scenes to start developing some of those strategies. What are we going to do that's not only going to give them the good investment experience that I spoke about, but how are we best going to structure things so they're ticking off those goals that are at the highest priority for them. So we're going to develop a bit of a strategy behind that. But before we can present it, I mentioned earlier that we have a wealth management considerations meeting where we're actually sitting down with the client and talking about their investment preferences. Might be one of those things. So, do they want a social responsible investing platform or strategy? Do they want to have their funds invested on an administration service, or would they prefer to manage that personally? Those types of questions to really develop what is going to be the right vehicle for their portfolio. But before we get to that stage, of course, we need to get a buy-in from the client that they actually want to deal with us. So post that discovery meeting, we've got a pretty good idea of what it's going to take to put that advice together. I've usually given the client a good indication of that cost, either in that first phone call or in the discovery meeting. So we then send them a letter of engagement, followed up with a phone call to explain, look, this is our understanding of your situation, and this is the cost to put together a plan for you, that's going to help you achieve those goals that we've spent 90 minutes developing.
Yeah. Now this is a really interesting process, because you're doing the discovery meeting, then you're looking at, then you're able to work out what the fee is. And you've already mentioned that you have a transparent fee structure in place that you can use as the yardstick or the benchmarking of what fees for that client are going to be. And then they also understand that. But you also, the beauty about this is they've worked out what their goals are, and now the fees relate. The measure of success is we're paying this fee, but we're going to be able to achieve these goals.
Yep, exactly. You're not paying me to give you 5% above the typical balanced portfolio. Again, I mentioned if that's your goal, we're not going to work together. But if your idea of coming to see me is so we can tick off these goals, well, I'll tell you whether we can or we can't. But our job is to make sure you can, and so that's what you're paying for.
Yeah, fantastic. So, in the absence of value, the value is achieving the goals. Brilliant. So you've gone through the fee structure with them. They agreed to that. You also mentioned in that meeting, you're talking a little bit about investments. Is this really not a financial literacy, but is this really just an understanding of the client's financial history and what their thoughts and values are? But you might also be giving a little bit of information around, like if they don't quite know what do you mean by social investing? Are you giving a little bit more of education in this meeting?
So not in the discovery meeting, but in the second meeting, the wealth management considerations being, absolutely. So that's talking through some of the options that are out there, and getting their preferences, and they may not have a preference at that stage. So our job is to actually spend the time to educate them on what is available. And similarly, it's the iceberg mentality where you don't want to go into all the details straight away, which is very easy to do because we all have that information in our heads. It's really to ask the client, is that enough information? Get them to talk back to you and explain that they understand. And once we were able to sort of go through and answer those questions, it allows us to put together the most appropriate strategy for them.
Fantastic. Okay. And how long is this meeting, between the discovery and the presentation meeting?
So the meeting usually, again, we'll set aside 90 minutes because I think it's too difficult to try and rush that. Again, it could be that the client says, yep, I absolutely want to do ethical or social responsible investing, tick that box. They've got a good understanding of how it works. I want to use an administration service because it makes my investing easier. I get my tax back at the end of the year. That's great. That's easy. We can go through that quickly. But, my experience is probably 70 to 80% of clients really don't understand those things. So it's about really trying to explain to them what's out there, and therefore what's going to be, the most suitable for them.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you've been through, a phone call, fact find process, 2 90-minute meetings. I'm taking it you're not going to get a lot of dropout after this.
No. Look, I think, again, because the clients have signed a letter of engagement, to already, I guess, sign up for the advice before that second meeting, they're already committed to the process. Every now and again, you're going to get a client that does say, wow, we've had 2 90-minute meetings here. This seems like a long process. And absolutely it is. You can't develop these things overnight. And I've always said to clients that you got to be on the journey together. And really, the tough part is up front, because we develop all the goals, we do all that. It's only a matter of really reviewing them on an ongoing basis and changing and adapting to things when they change and challenges come up. But it's tough to start off with, and it is a commitment from both of us. You can't just give everything to me and expect me to do it. That's the old mentality, and that's what I think, again, we did ourselves a disservice by just saying we can do everything for you without taking the clients on that journey. As cliche as that sounds, it's absolutely the truth. Yeah.
Well, it's a tough process, and it's a long process because we haven't got you to your goals yet.
Yep.
So obviously this is a relationship business. It's a long-term relationship business. I'll ask you some more questions about the way because you do a 12-monthly structure now, like a 12-monthly fee structure.
Yep, that's right. So all of our clients that are ongoing clients, they sign up for the next 12 months on a fixed term contract agreement.
Yep.
I think the world is going that way, and we as a business decided, look, we have no issues with that. Clients know what they pay us, and so let's just not worry about having that discussion. Let's have it. And also, I think what it does do is it really puts the value of what we're doing on paper. It's not wishy-washy. These are the things you're going to get, and if we don't give them to you, then we haven't provided. We haven't met our end of the contract. So I think it is a little bit of extra paperwork and process, I guess, but it's not a difficult conversation with our clients.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, so we've gone through that second 90-minute meeting. Tell us what's next.
So I guess after that meeting, we've now got all the information we need to fully develop the strategy, and we've probably, to be honest, done 90% of it already behind the scenes. So the next meeting is effectively the presentation meeting, the advice presentation, and or could be the mutual commitment meeting as well, because it is a mutual commitment. Again, we still need to decide whether the clients are the best fit for us. I think in most cases, we wouldn't have got to this stage otherwise, but there are things that change along the way, and we do think it's important to continue to review that. But yeah, the advice presentation meeting is all about presenting their advice in the most simplistic way, depending on the client's circumstances and their understanding. So we're not going to put a statement of advice in front of them and say, there you go. We're going to put together in most cases a PowerPoint presentation or some type of presentation, depending on the client. And realistically, it's focusing on those key areas, and always having those key areas of advice come back to aligning with those goals.
Yep, nice. Okay, so you're presenting the strategies for implementation, and then you mentioned the mutual consent. Is that sometimes a separate meeting, or is it?
Can be. Yep. Again, we don't want to ever put clients, feeling like they have to sign something. I think invariably what we get in that advice presentation meeting, Fraser, is clients are really, where do we sign? Because they're excited about the process. They've spent the time doing it, so they really want to get on the journey. I think really you need to judge the situation as it is. But, if you think the client has a very good understanding in that meeting, I think that's fine. Let's do all the paperwork and get it done. Again, we're a business, so we've got to be efficient at the same time. But if you do get an understanding the client is still a little bit unsure of certain things, we will then have a fourth meeting or process, if you like, called the mutual commitment meeting, which can be separate, and that is literally you come in, sign forms, and proceed.
Yeah, no, I like this mutual commitment conversation because it sort of says, like, as a business, we promise to do these things. These are our commitment to you, and these are your commitment to the relation. So both parties are committing to something. Do you have that process where you say, this is what you're doing, this is what we're going to do?
Yep. And that fixed term contract agreement is kind of that as well, because we're outlining these are all the things we're going to do for you for the fee that you're going to pay. Again, not trying to hide the fee, because the fee is our fee. That's our value. We're in a service business, so they can marry those things up, and that is the commitment from us to deliver.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so that's and then there's implementation, and we're off on the journey. So that's quite a long process compared to, say, like a traditional process. You then had to go back and, I guess, price that into the fee structure.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. So we explain to clients up front, we're not the cheapest, and I think they'll see after that journey why we're not the cheapest, because we are going to make sure that they hit the goals that are achievable to them, and we're going to be the ones that tell them when goals are not achievable to them as well. We're not just going to take their information, put a plan together, get them to sign things, and they're off and running, because it's going to come to an off the cliff point in time if you go down that path.
Yeah, I think this is a really important piece of the puzzle. Like, not all goals are going to be achievable, and sometimes people have goals and expectations, but setting that certainty around the fact that at the moment, if you keep doing what you're doing, that's not going to happen, is really a super important part of the conversation. It's not about we're going to help you achieve all your goals. The first part is we're going to make your goals realistic.
And I actually don't mind if we have goals that are not achievable, because I think we've done our job quite well if that's the result, because it's again, maybe using a cliche word here, but it's the dream. It's what are things that we never thought we could do, because if they're putting those things down on paper, often they are achievable, and you're getting that excitement from clients thinking, we never thought we could do that, and you're developing the strategy to allow them to.
Yep. Now, tell us about when they come back for a progress meeting or a review meeting.
Yep. So I guess post the mutual commitment meeting or the advice meeting, if they're combined, we have a 45-day meeting. And I think that's a really important one as well, because as you know, whenever you sign up for something new, you get a lot of paperwork, or you get a lot of emails, and a lot of it doesn't make sense. So, excuse me, that 45-day meeting could really just be about, I've received all this stuff. It might be a 10-minute phone call, or it might be a coffee at a coffee shop, but I've received all this stuff. What does it mean? And we can just say, look, these are the things that are important to keep. We've got copies of these other ones, so you don't really need to worry about keeping those for now. And then that kind of takes care of that process.
This is a really important piece for the understanding piece, right? Obviously, with FASEA, we need to make sure that clients understand the information we're giving them, and that was the whole purpose of the advice documentation in the first place, to make sure clients understand. But that 45-day meeting, when it's not fresh in the mind, and it hasn't just been, oh yeah, I understand it, and then you get to 45 days later, and do you still understand it? Because a whole lot of other stuff has happened between now and then, to really bring that and just really lock that knowledge of understanding in.
Yeah, and psychology tells us that we all have a bit of buyer's remorse. So, the idea of that meeting is just to make, to revisit why they signed up in the first place for this plan, and what you're doing for them.
And I'm imagining it's also probably not a bad opportunity for clients to re-engage as to why they paid the money, understand they got value out of the fees they paid, have the ability to tell their friends at the barbecue why they paid that money for the advice, and how they received value, and could even be a marketing opportunity from your business point of view. Yeah,
well, that as you're exactly right. That 45-day meeting is where, if we know the experience has been good, and we'll ask the client that. If the experience has been good, well, of course, the next question is there anyone else we can help? So, that's how we're trying to help them, but create an experience of them wanting to refer people to us.
Yeah, it's a brilliant opportunity, and of course, with the modern way we We operate online now. There's a lot of stuff around reviews. I don't like the word testimonial because it kind of feels a bit more forced, but we review everything these days. We purchase something online and we're asked to do a review. And so that I think that's probably a good opportunity during that 45-day meeting to then ask for a review. You know, what was life like before you met us? What was life like after you met us and been through the experience? And what would you recommend other people do if they're sitting on the fence? That kind of conversation would be brilliant in that 45-day meeting.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then once we get on to it and we're working with the clients for a while, maybe a couple of years, tell us about how these review progress meetings happen.
So we would, at minimum, have an annual review, and that's just again to make sure that the goals that they've got are still of highest priority. We're ticking off the goals. We certainly don't have to wait for that annual review though, because if something happens in the next 6 months, well, we should be on the phone. We should be discussing it. As we know, life is not linear, so we are going to be talking to clients probably 4 or 5 times throughout the year anyway. But that annual review, I think it's really important to have, set in concrete that we're going to catch up here no matter what, because, that's something that we all get to understand how the process works. And it may seem like nothing's changed. And often I know clients will come in saying, well, nothing's changed, everything's good. But then when you start talking to them more, you start uncovering, quite a few things may have changed. So we need to, just make sure we're on top of those things, and having that formal meeting, I think, is really important. So the process goes that, again, we'll send out an electronic questionnaire, just say, look, update this of anything that may have changed. And when they send that back, it allows us to start already developing the strategies that we might need to discuss with them.
Yeah. Now, one of obviously with short-term and medium-term goals, cash flow is a massive piece of that jigsaw puzzle. If somebody needs more work on cash flow, is that obviously you price that in as part of the plan and then have more meetings with them around cash flow?
Yep. Look, my experience is that we do cash flow modelling for probably 99% of clients. Cash flow is king. Understanding what their ins and outs are is really what is going to allow us to determine whether their goals are achievable. So probably I didn't mention before, but right back in that discovery meeting, I really will explain that once we have an understanding of your goals, that we're going to come back and we're going to graphically represent your situation, because that's going to show you quite simplistically whether you're on track to achieve those goals or not. If you're an engineer or a client that does like more numbers and detail, we can send you all the numbers. But I think in reality, most clients are happy just to know, am I on track or not? And if I'm not, what can we do to get there? If I am, what can we do to stay there?
Yeah, it's interesting, this graphical representation, and how, as long as it's explained nice and simply, we not necessarily the graph, but we love the visual, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I think, we might talk more in our conversation today about what the future might look like with regards to this, but certainly, if you send a graph to a client, they're just going to go, what does this mean? Like any graph. So it's really important to spend the time to explain to them, how it works. And then, my clients now, I really don't have to explain it to them. I can send them an updated graph, and they'll know exactly what it means.
Yeah, and I think it also forms part of the conversation about the mutual understanding piece. Like what the client can control, obviously, usually is their cash flow, how much they earn and spend, and what that means to their plan, and then how that tracks and how that affects all of their goals in the future, whether it's short or medium or long-term goals.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge I've found probably in my whole career is clients having a knowledge of what they do spend. So we are using tools now to look into their bank accounts and look at the expenses to try and make that process as easy as possible, because everyone hates the word budget. No one wants to sit down and do one. So if we can help the clients do that in the most efficient way, then I think they're going to win from it, and certainly it allows us to give the best advice.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. The B word has become a little bit hated, but people like to understand what their spending plan might be, or their progress plan, or all the things that. This is certainly one of those levers that if you've got a plan in place, at least, to how you're going to spend your money, then at least you've got something to structure it on. And you're right, technology has changed a lot over the last few years. Rather than pulling out a bank account and sitting down with it, and then maybe trying to get that into a spreadsheet through to the bank account scraping technology and open banking when we finally get there. I think we're on this evolution of that cash flow piece, and we can, as advisors, you can help more and more and more in that space.
Yep, I agree.
Fantastic, thank you. So that's those are your meeting processes. Tell us how what are the sort of things that you're looking to evolve with the business in the future?
Look, again, it really comes down to, I think, technology that's available. But the big one, I think, is how advice is going to look in terms of the presentation of it. My gut feel, and I think where we're sort of working towards as a business, is that statements of advice, of course, will probably going to have their place as a written document, but I believe it may be a video presentation to the client, because it's something that they can quickly and easily look back on and review. It's a much more efficient way for us as advisors to present that advice. And so, I would hope that we can have the disclaimers and disclosures that are there, and that's obviously very important, but in a way that the clients can actually understand, because as we all probably agree, and I know my clients do, a 60-page statement of advice, everything gets lost. The disclaimers and disclosures just become very, very difficult. But if you're black and white with clients, this is what you're doing, this is what it's going to cost. We shouldn't have to go down the path of having everything written in, tiny font. So that's where I think the industry is going to go, and I hope it does.
Yeah, that's certainly after my own heart in that respect. I'm looking forward to the day when we can do our statements as advice, as a statement, not necessarily a written document, and to be able to record a meeting, record the plan and presentation meeting, and we can all. We're recording the Zoom meeting right now. Do you know what I mean? It becomes a video, and there's certainly a process that we go through with what's required in a statement of advice, from the warnings and those sorts of things, which can be recorded once and put in, by the way, and then obviously client understanding and the fees and the conflicts and all those things. But if you go through that checklist, technically we should be able to get there one day, and I absolutely agree with that, and I look forward to continuing to push that envelope as it comes. But I think for now, obviously, people want words on paper, not necessarily on paper, but at least in a digital format. But we're still going by the words at the moment. Yep. We'll get there. Fantastic. Give us some tips for planners that are thinking about creating or getting more of a goals-based advice process in their business, especially around the idea of transitioning existing clients who aren't maybe in a goals-based advice process to a goals-based advice process. What tips would you give them?
Look, I think the number one tip is learning to ask good questions. I would spend plenty of time, even if it's writing scripts out for yourself, just to practice. You mentioned, role playing. That stuff, it is a bit uncomfortable, but if you've got someone that you can do that with, it really, really does help in moving a business from solely being just about selling insurance or selling returns in super. If you can really focus on the questions you can ask clients, I think you're halfway there. So that would be my number one tip.
Yeah, fantastic. So really work on a question bank or a list of questions that you can go back to if you need it.
Yeah, and obviously have a place to document those goals and a central central strategy to be able to go back to those goals, not only with yourself as the advisor, but the client as well.
Yeah. And what about for a client that we've kind of trained in the past to do things a certain way, and now we're introducing a new way? How did you tackle that?
And that's always hard, because I guess we're constantly changing as an industry. So we've probably all had these conversations along the way, that this is changing and that's changing. But I don't shy away from it. I certainly think when I'm having a conversation with a client, I'll go back and talk about the history of our business and Shadforth, and how really we used to do it this way, and we thought we were adding value by buying shares and selling shares and doing it this way. But as information comes to light, we need to be constantly evolving as a business to be able to give you, our client, the absolute best outcome.
Yeah.
And it's like medicine, isn't it? That you don't keep doing the same things over and over again just because you've done it that way. If there's a better way to do it and there's evidence to tell us that there's a better way of doing it, then you should change. And so that's all a goals-based business should be doing, is looking at the evidence out there about A, what clients actually want, B, really what are they needing to get in terms of advice, and our job is to tie those things together.
Yeah. I heard something great the other day. They talked about the idea of, as humans, we actually don't mind change. Change is okay as long as there's certainty at the other end, and we just don't like the change if there's uncertainty at the other end. And so I think to be able to understand those questions, get your certainty, and then once you've got your belief around what the outcome is, you can point to that, and people necessarily won't mind a new process or a new way of doing things if they've got that certainty. So.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good way of putting it.
Fantastic. Finn, if you go back in time and have a do-over and do something different, where would you go? What would you do?
In terms of in the industry, or look, I think probably for me, because I came into the industry where our business very much was still in the buying and selling of shares, and that was our focus. I think I probably spent a lot of those early years still, trying to learn how do we discuss those things with clients. So if I had my time again, obviously I'd go delve straight into the fact of what are we here for? What are we trying to achieve for clients? What are they paying us for at the end of the day? And I would spend far more time on that process. If I were a younger advisor, I guess wanting to come into the industry now, I'd say really spend time learning that process, spend time with a mentor. Don't rush it. If you rush it, you're going to, I think, come out the start process being very green, and I don't think that you'll last as well in the industry. Is my feeling, and I've seen that happen in our business as well. So it is a process that does take time, and you need that, I think, 4 or 5 years of education and mentorship and understanding of how to have conversations with clients before you're ready to be able to jump to that next level.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Take your time, find yourself the right mentor, and just allow the process to evolve and allow that experience to gather. It's a really good point. Well, Finn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and chatting and being so open around your business and explaining how you work. Really appreciate that. And I think a lot of people would get some amazing value from that. So thank you.
Thanks, Fraser. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to have a chat to you.
No problem. And if somebody wants to continue the conversation, how would they best get hold of you or find you?
Give me a call. So phone number is 03, being in Hobart, 62 111 111, or they can send me an email on finn.dorney@sfg.com.au.
Fantastic. And we'll include some of those details in our show notes, and of course your LinkedIn profile as well. Maybe we can find you through there.
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you, Finn. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Fraser Jack here. I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Goals-Based Advice Podcast. If you're in Australia and after CPD or continued professional development points for this episode, then you can by going to adviceintelligence.com/resources and following the prompts. That's also where you can find the full video of each episode, as well as the detailed show notes and the links to the topics discussed. So if you're enjoying this show, subscribe and please help me spread the word by sharing it with your friends and colleagues. And I would truly appreciate a review on iTunes, or find me on LinkedIn and share your feedback. Catch you next time.